Hello, everyone. Let's discuss the psychology that is being investigated in the 12 core studies that are part of our A-level psychology syllabus, AS psychology syllabus. So to begin with the studies that come under the heading of biological approach, number one, we have the study that was conducted by Dement and Liebman. Before I start with this, let me clarify there is I have tried putting up these points to help you in terms of understanding one. Number two, in terms of helping you in terms of attempt a question, because I've come across many students who'd be like, oh, we know the psychology that is being investigated in a particular study. In fact, if we talk about our psychology course book, if we talk about a psychology course book, it is pretty there's a heading that says the psychology being investigated, which of course makes it easier for students to understand. However, there are many students who still find it challenging to put those points in the form of an answer if you've been asked about the psychology being investigated for a particular study. Now, this particular part, do we get questions on this? Of course, we do. Uh, what are the amount of marks that the examiner might allot to a question of this sort? If we talk about past papers, we've had a 2-mark question, we've had a 3-mark question, and we've had a 5-mark question on this as well. So I've tried putting it in front. I've tried putting it over here in a manner that helps you understand this. Additionally, it helps you write an answer as well. So to begin with, if we speak about the psychology that was being investigated in the study that was conducted by Timmett and Gleitman, the psychology being investigated through this study included rapid eye movement. I'm sure everyone by now should have an idea. REM, that is rapid eye movement sleep, is a phase of sleep where a person is paralyzed. By paralyzed, what we mean is the muscles of a person are paralyzed. It would be better if you add the muscle part over there. This study investigated the role REM plays in terms of dream recall. During REM phase of sleep, an individual's eyes flicker and they can breathe, but all other muscles are paralyzed. During NREM sleep, that is non-rapid eye movement, there's a difference in brain activity as compared to REM sleep. Now, if we speak about, let's just say we've had a 4-mark question on this. Let's just say we've had a 3-mark question on this. We would get the first mark through this part. I'll rather put brackets over here so that you guys understand it better. This is how you'd expect the examiner to give you the first mark. REM sleep is a phase of sleep where a person is paralyzed. This investigated the role REM plays in terms of dream recall. Now, connecting it back to the study, during REM phase of sleep, an individual's eyes flicker and they can breathe, but all of the muscles are paralyzed. And the fourth mark, during our NREM sleep, there's a difference in brain activity as compared to REM sleep. So this is just one way out of many others through which you could get your marks if you get a 4-mark question on this particular study. Now, taking this a step further, additionally, Dement and Kleitman also used electroencephalograms, EEG, to measure brainwave activity. EEGs are used to measure the amplitude and frequency of brainwaves. Now, you don't necessarily, it's on your discretion, depends on how well you prepared at the moment. It depends on how much you want to learn. Because at this point, what might occur to you is, will we have enough of lines to be able to write such a lengthy response? Again, it depends on the amount of marks that the examiner has allotted to it. If the examiner has put this question for worth 3 marks, you'd get 6 lines there. If the examiner has put this question worth 4 marks, you'd get 4 lines. If it is, which doesn't happen very often, but if this question is there in front of you as a 5-mark question, then you'd get 10 marks. So yeah, again, it depends a lot on the amount of marks that the examiner has allotted to this. So if it's a 3 to 4-mark question, you might as well just put the first paragraph to use. If it's a 5-mark question, you'd have to bring in content from the second paragraph as well. Quickly moving on to the second study that is again a part of the biological research. This is the study that was conducted by Hassett et al. Monkey toy preferences. Now, Hassett et al., for instance, if you get a question that says describe the psychology that was investigated by the study by the study conducted by Hassett et al. Bracket monkey toy preferences. Hassett et al. Investigated sex differences amongst male and female monkeys. The type of play and toy preferences differ between human infants with differing sex chromosomes. Many people believe the differences shown between male and female children in terms of showing preference towards particular toys are due to society's differing expectations of boys and girls. However, Hassett et al., through this investigation, believed biological factors are also important. I'm sure all of you, whoever's done learning this particular study, you would know that the psychology that was being investigated over here was in terms of, I mean, one of the aspects of psychology that was being investigated over here was in terms of sex differences. Turning it into a paragraph, you could do it this way. Again, this is not something that the CI has prescribed. You could come up with something even better than this as well. Taking this ahead, if you want to add up something else over here too. So the first point over here was in terms of sex differences. The second point over here in terms of sex hormones. Now, the psychological investigation made by Hassett et al. Also included sex hormones, example, testosterone or estrogen, that affect brain development. According to them, this may explain why boys and girls prefer toys that can be played with in different manners. So if you're getting a 2-mark question, you might as well just restrict yourself to this response. If you're getting a 3, 4, 5-mark question, then I'd suggest you move on and bring in another point that was being investigated in this particular study as well. Now, taking this a step further, let's quickly move on to the third point. This study again is a part of our biological approach. The study that was conducted by Halsell et al. That was about mindfulness and brain scans. The psychology being investigated by Halsell et al. Included, there's deliberately, I mean, we're including this word included over here deliberately. This shows the examiner that we know there was more, but we just restricting ourselves to one point, keeping in mind the amount of marks that are allotted to that particular question. So the psychology being investigated by Halsell et al. Included mindfulness. What is mindfulness now? Mindfulness is a stress reduction technique used to improve the well-being of an individual through developing awareness of the present moment and encouraging compassionate, non-judgmental attitudes. Through neuroimaging, the researchers investigated which brain structures may be involved. Now, I have deliberately used this word investigated and investigated over here so that you understand how it is not difficult to answer a question when you know what points were there that were being studied. See, this is not difficult. It's just that many students, I've seen them finding this difficult and challenging. It is not, as you could see. Now, taking this ahead, additionally, Halsell et al. Now, I'm using this word additionally over here, keeping in mind, let's just say if we have a question more than 3 marks. So additionally, Halsell et al. Also investigated localization of function, right? So the first was mindfulness. The first point over here that we mentioned was mindfulness. The second is localization of function. And let me say this again. This isn't just what was investigated there. We've just picked up few points that help you understand this and be able to revise this and be able to answer a question if you get one. So additionally, Halsell et al. Investigated localization of function of human brain. This is the idea. Now you're developing this point, right? You're developing or you're explaining what localization of function of human brain means. This is the idea that specific brain structures are responsible for specific behavioral cognitive processes. In this study, they used magnetic resonance imaging, and that is MRI, and voxel-based morphometry, that is VBM, to examine which brain structures undergo changes following MBSR training. If you have studied this, if you've learned this research, you'd understand exactly why we have chosen these particular points over here. And if you haven't studied it as yet, you might as well just pause this here and try to learn this right away. Now, taking this ahead, and one more thing, the content that you have over here, if you just pause and read and understand and learn, this is going to help you answer many other questions too. This could help you recall the aim aim of a particular study. This could help you if you get a question where they ask you about the techniques that were used to measure data or to gather data rather, you could say it was the MRI and the VBM. Now, number 4, let's quickly move on to number 4, the study that was conducted by Andrade. This study comes under the heading of cognitive approach, cognitive psychology. The psychology being investigated by Andrade et al. Included memory. So this is one thing out of others, and attention. So there are 2 things, right? So the first is memory, the second is attention. Again, depending on the number of marks that have been allotted to this particular question, you would decide what to write. And remember, you don't need to worry. The amount of marks would decide the amount of lines you get. Memory refers to our ability to store information that has been processed, then locate and retrieve it at a later time to use. Now, for instance, I'm asking you, I am encouraging you, I am suggesting you pause and you learn it right away. It might just take 30 more seconds, but do it. This again is an example of memory. I am trying to uh, I'm trying to make you understand something and then process it and then locate it somewhere where you could retrieve it when you are sitting for your examination. Now, taking this ahead, through the study, this part, through this study, the researchers wanted to investigate if doodling helps improve memory. This is the first part, and this first part relies on the role that memory has played. The second part over here, however, has to do with attention. Now, taking this ahead, attention refers to our mental ability to concentrate. Remember, recall the study, remember what the study was about. Attention refers to our mental ability to concentrate. It can be about focusing on a task and trying to exclude other stimuli that could interfere with the concentration. Through this study, now again, I would want you all to concentrate at this point. Let everything else that you have around you in your surrounding be. If you're not, if you have other family members sitting with you, request them to request them to give you some space so that you could concentrate and focus on what you're doing. So attention refers to a mental ability to concentrate. It can be about focusing on a task and trying to exclude other stimuli that could interfere with the concentration. Through this study, the researchers wanted to investigate if doodling helps concentrate by maintaining arousal, for example, by giving you something physical to do while you think. Now, a paragraph like this might take good 8 9 lines, for 8 9 or 8 to 10 lines. Even if you're getting a 5 mark question on the psychology being investigated, you know for a fact that you are not missing on any point. If you're not missing on any point, you're not missing on any mark. Taking this ahead, the second study under the heading of cognitive psychology, cognitive approach is the one that was conducted by Baron Cohen et al. The psychology being investigated through this research included theory of mind. We know, we're showing the examiner that we know there was more. We're just choosing to talk about one. That is the ability to determine the mental state of ourselves and other people. This is also about how we use this ability to explain the actions of other people or to understand other people's actions. This ability to determine the mental state of other people can help us predict the actions of others, right? You need to understand other people's behavior. You need to understand other people's actions to be able to predict how they would behave next. Through this research, Baron Cohen et al. Wanted to investigate if autistic people lacked the theory of mind. So very simple. I'm just showing you why I'm using the word investigate based on the information that is already present in our course book. I'm just putting it to use, putting it into a paragraph that could help us score full marks in our examination. Additionally, Baron Cohen et al. Were investigating social sensitivity. Now, what is social sensitivity? Sensitivity amongst autistic people. Social sensitivity is the ability to identify and understand social cues and context when interacting with others. It refers to how well you can understand other people's feelings. Baron Cohen et al. Through this research tested social sensitivity of autistic people through the ICE test. Now, even if you're getting a 3 mark question, this is good enough to help you score a 3 on 3, right? If it's a 5 mark question, I mean, it's on your discretion. Use any point you want, but it always has to do with the amount of marks that have been allotted to it. The next one, the sixth study from our syllabus, the third study from cognitive psychology, the study that was conducted by Pozzolo et al. Lineups. The psychology being investigated through this research included eyewitness testimony and false positive responses. Eyewitness testimony refers to the information provided by an individual or group based on what they can recall from observing an incident that is usually criminal in nature. So I'll just underline this. Information provided by an individual or group based on what they can recall from observing an incident that is usually criminal in nature. This is based on recall. Okay. Now, I hope you've understood it so far. A common problem noticed here is when eyewitnesses give false positive responses. Pozzolo et al. Investigated correct identification, and false positive responses in a lineup. So you're clearly showing the examiner what, I mean, you could elaborate on this. You just have to open your notebook and open your course book. If you're using the course book to prepare yourselves for the examination, you see how you could add up more to this, right? Just in case if you end up getting a 5-mark question. Quickly moving on to the study that was conducted by Bandura et al. This study comes under the heading of learning approach or learning psychology. Having a look at this, the psychology being investigated through this research included social learning theory. This centers around observing and imitating behavior, right? So what is social learning theory? Social learning theory centers around observing and imitating behaviors. Like I said earlier, if you learn the content that you come across over here on the screen right now, this would help you answer other questions too. If you have a look at the past paper questions on Bandura et al., you'd see that you have had questions on social learning theory. So this piece of information over here could help you prepare for that as well. According to Bandura et al., people pay attention to a role model. They retain the information gained and might feel motivated to want to imitate the behavior. This is about social learning theory. Number 2, if you want to add up another point, additionally, Bandura et al. Also investigated delayed imitation. This is when someone witnesses a behavior at one point, but only reproduces that behavior at a different time point. Delayed imitation, right? You witness a behavior at one point and then you imitate it at another. In this experiment, children were exposed to aggressive and non-aggressive adult models and were then tested for the amount of imitative learning in a new situation in the absence of a model. Remember, in the absence of a model. I hope you understand this. Okay, at this point, I'd like to take this opportunity and show you a question that we've had on the psychology being investigated by the study conducted by Bandura et al. Yeah, if we have a look at we had this question in November 2020. This happens to be a 5-mark question. Like I'd said, not very often, but yeah, there's a possibility you might end up getting a 5-mark question on the psychology being investigated as well. So how is it that the examiner has divided this? I would use arrows to help you understand this better. Okay, so here, and here. So this says 1 mark per psychology being point made, 1 mark for identification, identification mark is available, 1 mark available for an explicit example from the study. So if you're getting a 5-mark question like this, you might as well use more than 1 points to or you might as well use more than 1 points. You identify them, you exemplify them by explaining them. So credit-worthy psychology included could be social learning theory, frustration, aggression, delayed imitation. So have a look at this. Social learning theory was being investigated, which centers around observing and imitating learning. People pay attention to a role model. They retain this information in the memory. They must feel like they are capable of imitating the behavior. They must feel motivated to want to imitate the behavior, feel will get rewarded for imitation. Now you could use social learning theory over here. You could use aggression, you could use delayed imitation, whatever helps you. You identify a point and you develop it. This was just to show you that yes, we do end up getting a 5-mark question too. And just in case if you feel that I have provided you with a lot more information than you need to know, it doesn't happen often, but it does happen. So yeah, that was just to show this. Getting back to where we were, after Bandura, we have the study that was conducted by Fagan et al. On elephant learning. The psychology being investigated through this research included operant conditioning. This is a type of conditioning based on the idea of learning by consequences. The consequences are based around reinforcements or rewards and punishment. Fagan et al. Use the concept of operant conditioning through positive reinforcement to teach elephants to successfully engage in a voluntary full trunk wash to help test for tuberculosis, TB. I mean, it's better if you write the complete, write it in the full form, write down tuberculosis over here. So again, if you're getting a 3-mark question over here, this is good enough to ensure that you're scoring a 3 on 3. However, if you get more, if you get a question worth more marks. Additionally, Fagan et al. Investigated the role behavioral chaining played in successfully engaging in a voluntary full trunk wash to help test for TB. Animals were trained to perform a sequence that is a chain of behaviors using reinforcement. The animal was only rewarded when the first 2 behaviors were performed consecutively. Then a third behavior was added, withdrawing and presenting rewards until the full chain had been learned. So yes, you'd get to know operant learning, operant conditioning, you'd get to know behavioral chaining, you'd get to know delayed imitation, you'd get to know social learning by just pausing it over here, reading it a couple of times and memorizing it. Taking this quickly ahead, we have another study, the last study from the learning approach that was conducted, that was actually a case study conducted by Savard and Silverman on a young boy who was diagnosed with button phobia. So the psychology being investigated through this research included phobias. These are when people develop some irrational fear of an object or situation. Now, this is enough for someone to score a 2 on 2. I'd like to take this opportunity again to show you a question from the past papers where the examiner shows how where the examiner shows how a student can score a 2 on 2 by just writing what you see in the box in front of you. So I'd like, let me show it to you. Here you go. You have a question from March 2020. If you have a look at this question, the question over here reads, from the case study by Sabat and Silverman, who gave therapy to a 9-year-old boy after his negative experience with buttons, outline one psychological concept that was investigated in the study. So yeah, the same thing being phrased in a different manner. Have a look at this. You get the first mark for identification. You get the second mark for outlining. So this says phobias were investigated. You get the first mark over here. You get the second mark when you write they were there. These are when people develop some irrational fear of an objective, or sorry, of an object or a situation. So yeah, taking this ahead. Now we left with three different core studies. The study that was conducted by Milgram, by Perry et al., and by Pilyavin et al. So the infamous study that was conducted by Milgram on destructive obedience. The psychology being investigated through this research included obedience. This is when we behave in a certain way in response to the demands of an authority figure. Through this research, Milgram showed how orders from a person perceived to be an authority were followed. Again, this should be good enough to be able to help you score a 2 on 2. I think it might work for some for a 3 on 3 as well. Now, additionally, according to Milgram, obedience is the result of social pressure. This is another psychological aspect that is being investigated in this study. What is social pressure now? These are pressures that come from other individuals or groups that have a direct influence on how we feel or how we behave. Events such as the Holocaust could be explained better through the social pressure individuals experience in a particular situation rather than the characteristic of the individuals involved. Again, you put up a point, you explain what social pressure was, and then you further tried exemplifying it. Taking it ahead, we have the study that was conducted by Perry et al. On personal space. The psychology being investigated through this research included interpersonal distance. What is interpersonal distance now? This refers to the physical distance between people, such as how close they sit or stand to each other. Perry et al. Were trying to investigate whether oxytocin affects interpersonal distance in people who are seen as having empathetic skills. Now, you'd see when I use oxytocin and when I refer to empathy, I would be able to do this only when I have a thorough understanding of the study and I've learned it well. Taking it ahead. Additionally, Perry et al. Were investigating the role social hormones play in the regulation and perception of interactions in humans. They appear to help in the positive feelings of social interactions between humans and coordinate the cause and effect of these interactions. Through this research, Perry et al. Investigated the role of one such hormone known as oxytocin. So you could use this point, or alternatively, you could use the second point too, whatever works for you. Next, the last study amongst the 12 studies that are part of our syllabus. The study that was conducted by Pilyavin et al. The psychology being investigated through this research included bystander apathy. Bystander apathy. The idea that the presence of other people discourage a person from helping or intervening in an emergency situation. Therefore, people are more likely to help when they're alone than when they are part of a group. Additionally, Pilyavin et al. Investigated diffusion of responsibility. One reason why groups of people do not help individuals in need is that responsibility is shared equally among the group so that each person has only a small proportion of responsibility. Pilyavin et al. Was set on to investigate diffusion of responsibility in a realistic setting. So yeah, you could pause at any point and learn this. You could read this, you could understand this. Let me clarify these. This is solely meant for last day revision. Of course, this helps you recall, or this helps you revise better. That has been the intention. I hope this has been helpful. Take good care of yourselves. Thank you.